Hi folks, hope you're okay today. I just want to read a quote from this book. It's an old book written in the 1950s by two scholars, Franklin W. Young and Howard Clark Key. But I was struck by something that I saw near the end of the book. It says, philosophical and critical thought. With the rise of biblical criticism, that is the application of the same kind of analytical, historical and literary methods to the Bible that were used in the analysis of any other works of literature or history. In the late 18th century, the way was open for the student of the Bible to select those parts that he believed to be authentic or authoritative. By careful analysis, the critic sought to reconstruct the historical situation of which the stories about Jesus originated. They chose from among the sayings and stories those that were considered to be authentic and assigned the others to their respective sources. Applied to the Gospels, this method made it possible to dismiss as unimportant those parts that speak of the return of Christ and the throne of judgment and the resurrection. They could be regarded as either accommodations by Jesus to the primitive outlook of his time, or as misconceptions that originated in the early church and were fictionally, though piously, ascribed by the Gospel writers to Jesus. Then the critic could proceed to reconstruct along the lines of his own presuppositions his portrait of the real Jesus. Accordingly, Jesus has been variously represented as poetic dreamer, a social reformer, a moral idealist, and a gentle prophet, and messenger of the love of God. Coupled with the development of critical method, and strongly influenced by it, was the rise of the progress theory, largely under the influence of the German philosopher Hegel, 1770 to 1831. Historians, including biblical historians, set about arranging history to conform to the dogma of inevitable progress. According to this theory, man moved through conflict upward towards the realization of the absolute, that is, the fulfillment of the perfect, predetermined goal of the historical process. According to Hegel, as unchangeable as the law of gravity was the principle that man's history was a story of unceasing progress from error to truth, from incompleteness to complete fulfillment of man's potentialities. Such primitive element of the biblical record as eschatology could be written off as inexpendable antiquities or as figurative representations of the very goal of which the philosophers were speaking in more sophisticated language. In either case, eschatology was no longer to be taken at face value as an important part of biblical faith. The kingdom of God was at best an archaic symbol for the culmination of the process of inevitable progress. Here's the point that I want to get off. First of all, they state here, which is correct, that the 18th century scholars, when they're studying the Bible, many of them pushed out the supernatural to fit the historical inquiry. What that led to is not studying the text in its Jewish context, and it meant rejecting some of the fundamental beliefs of Christianity which are rooted in Judaism. Secondly, philosophy played a big part in the deconstruction of Christianity, such as Hegel and other philosophers. Their ideas were implemented into biblical criticism, and it's that philosophy that was influenced in actually understanding the source material. So their presuppositions were actually colouring the investigation of the historical situation. And all these philosophies of understanding the Bible were turned upside down when people like Albert Schweitzer and others realized there was a Jewish context to studying about Jesus, and that meant we should not bring in our philosophy interpretation or our philosophy of history or our presupposed philosophies or even hermeneutical tools to the critical task, but we should actually look at the historical context in its context and be culturally specific in studying the life of Jesus, that he has a Jewish context. And so eschatology was recovered when it was taken away by the Hegelian philosophy, and a biblical criticism that was more interested in being anti-supernatural than being interested in being culturally specific and studying religions in their cultural context. Thank you for listening, and Hope you find that a blessing.